Hey there, everybody. Nice to see you again. This is me, Ben Calder, for the BTPA, the Bowen Therapy Professional Association here in the UK. Today, I'm really excited to share with you my interview with all-star practitioner Alastair McLoughlin, who has been involved in bodywork now since 1983 when he first qualified as a massage practitioner, and was then practicing Bowen Technique from 94, teaching from 1997 as a senior instructor, including teaching for the Bowen College of Australia. And he's a life member of the Bowen Association and also an honorary member of the London School of Physiology as well, which is beautiful. He developed the now very famous McLoughlin scar tissue release, MSTR, and is also the developer of AOB, the Art of Bodywork. And both of those training systems are both online and in person with Alastair. And I'm really looking forward to talking to him today. I've done both of those courses and trainings with him, and I really value his insights and his work into bodywork and Bowen Technique. So we've got a cracking interview for you today. I hope you really enjoy this. And let's not waste any time and get on with speaking to the man himself. Alastair, wonderful to see you again. It's been just over 2 years, I think, since you and I were actually communicating. So thank you so much for giving your time today.
You're welcome, Ben. Really nice to see you too, and to catch up. And it's a few years since we met together in Skipton in North Yorkshire there, where you took my 3-day Art of Bodywork class, and that was great. And really great to hear recently that you've been using my stuff too. That's
Absolutely.
Even better to hear.
Yeah, sure. Literally this week, I've been thinking about it in the lead up to this interview, and literally this week, I've been using some of your techniques in the work to great effect. So, and we're going to get into Art of Bodywork and other stuff a little bit later on. But what I'd like to begin with, just in case there's anybody that maybe hasn't listened to you before, hasn't come across any of your work, give us a little bit of your history. How did you get into all of this, and what led you through to where you are today?
Yeah, well, we've got to go back a fair way. My interest in bodywork began in the early 1980s. So, I did my remedial massage course about 1981, qualified in 1983. I didn't jump into practice straight away. It was a few years before I got established and really had the confidence to open a clinic. But I eventually did do that. Ran a very busy massage practice up in Lancashire, seeing upwards of, it was sometimes like 60 massage treatments a week. When I was fit and young, I could do it then. I couldn't do it now. But yeah, I did a lot of sports injury work. That was a really great grounding in all kinds of sports, including golfing, rugby and football. So got a lot of experience in treating injuries particularly. But then, a big part of my work is also, just for non-athletes, non-sports people, all the common stuff that you and I will see. But we're doing that through the medium of remedial massage. And then we got into the early 90s. So, somewhat about 10 years after that, when I heard about Bowen therapy, Bowen Technique, and it was actually one of my massage clients brought me a newspaper cutting about it. I mean, this is literally, before the days of having a computer even, and before the internet. And so you heard about all this stuff like through the newspapers or anything else like that. But didn't have a computer till a few years later, and as I say, no internet. But I looked at this newspaper article, and it was written by Julian Baker. Julian did the article, and I believe it created a lot of interest in Bowen at that time, and it really exploded, I think, from that singular newspaper article that appeared in the Daily Mail, I think it was. So I inquired a little bit more about that, and I trotted off from the north of England down to the south coast in Eastbourne, where I sat in on a 4-day course. The whole thing was taught, Bowen was completely taught it as a 4-day course, and that was it. And I've got to say, and recounting and thinking back to that course, when I first saw what it was, I thought, this is a lot of rubbish, is it? What is he doing, this guy? So I'm not impressed at all. And I remember phoning my wife up that evening and saying, like, well, I think I've been sold a pup here, I did. I remember in the hotel room phoning her up and saying, well, I don't know what's going on here, but I think I'm just wasting my money and going all the way down here, booking a hotel for 5 nights, whatever it was. And I said, I just can't see what this is about at all. So it wasn't until the second day of the course that I had a shoulder problem of my own. And it happened a few years prior when I was pushing somebody's car who wouldn't start. So I was pushing this car and I felt my shoulder give. And for about 15 years, I had this shoulder restriction. So on day 2 of the 4-day introductory Bowen course there, Julian worked on my shoulder. And it immediately freed that and gave me mobility back. And I thought, that's interesting. That's a bit interesting, you see. So we got to about day 3 and I was really getting into that. And by day 4, I'd already decided that I would like to teach this. And I told Julian so at the time. I remember at the end of that 4-day class, I said, I'd really love to teach this, Julian. I think it's phenomenal work. And in his usual style, he said, "All right, we'll see about that and all that." And as the time developed, and that was 94, I believe. I got a qualification from Aussie Wrench in 95, and then from there, both I and David Howells, who you'll know David Howells too, nice guys, David. Julian kind of mentored us or brought us along to want to teach. Interestingly, let's say that, that's how my interest in Bowen came about. And I went back to my clinic up in Lancashire and I started using Bowen. The massage was taking more of a back seat and I switched more to Bowen application work. And an interesting thing happened is that I all of a sudden started to get quiet in my business. Not because people weren't interested, but because I was fixing them up. And so these 60 a week eventually dropped down to 40 and 30 a week and 25 and 20. I'm thinking, hang on a minute, what's going on here? But eventually it started to increase again as the referrals then really came in. And I was using Bowen in the sports injury work too, for the guys at the rugby club and so on. And they were kind of didn't really know what to make of it. And an interesting thing about that was when I started using it, and I worked for this rugby team. It's just a local rugby team, not big, but I worked with them for about a year and a half. And it was during that time of me kind of switching towards it in Bowen work that they had their best season ever in the history of the club, just about, where they reached the quarterfinal of a national competition. And for them, that was unheard of. And I'm sure it was, and in fact, they played the quarterfinal down in Kidderminster, and it was 0-0 at half time. But for a bad second half, they could have won that game. But I think it was due to the work that I was doing with them, the recovery rate seemed a lot faster. And there was an observable difference. And of course, people, who are using Bowen in the sports arena will notice that too. And I'm sure they've noticed that as well. That's how it that was the evolution of where I got to. But the interesting thing that happened, that I've always been kind of a person that with my massage work too, and certainly when Bowen came along, in seeking to figure out problems as well. You'd get somebody in with a certain presentation and you do some work and that really didn't work. And then you try something else and that really didn't work. And so for me, it was, a big learning curve in those years where I would try different things to create changes in the presentation. And eventually, over time, created techniques that worked really consistently well. Because what I did find is that as I was developing stuff, I was using more of the stuff that I developed and less of the Bowen that I knew and the massage work, of course. And that was just kind of my evolution in learning and gaining experience. But I do remember the first time I met Oswald Wrench was at my certification seminar in 1995. It was in Chester. I remember, where it was. And of course, you'd only heard about Aussie in the magazines and so on. Who is this guy who, worked alongside or observed Tom Bowen. And of course, he was the great, source of knowledge that we all aspired to copy. But I remember, even by that time, I'd already looked at what else this Bowen move could do, and it's always been my idea. If you take this and apply it somewhere else, what do you get? And I remember going up to Aussie Wrench at Chester, 95, and I put out my hand and I said, "Hello, Mr. Wrench, nice to meet you." And he said, "Oh, hi, how are you?" And the second thing I said to him was, "Guess what? I found a new Bowen move." Right? And he said, "All right, okay." And it was a little bit, I remember the encounter really clearly, and it was a little bit like kind of, well, don't trouble me with that, kind of, and I'm trying to be, kind here and not dismissive, but I felt dismissed. But here was I was trying to show him something that I'd found, and it was a little bit like, no one would say that. For the people watching this, I'll tell you exactly what it was, and it was a move for toothache.
Mm-hmm.
All right. And it's something that I figured out about a year before. We were in America with the family in Disney World in Florida, and my oldest girl, she was about 12 at the time. She had a toothache, and I thought, gosh, well, take her to a dentist over here. It's going to cost the earth. And I remember from an acupressure book that there is a point on the hand that you can use acupressure for a toothache. So I thought, I wonder if I did a Bowen move there, what would that do? So I did, and it's just in the webbing of the between the and I just kind of did a Bowen move on it, and the pigment said it. She said it's gone now. All my toothache gone. I said, wow, it's fabulous. And so this is what I was telling Ozzy, and but I'm telling you folks now, you've never seen that before. If it's a right-sided pain, you do the right hand, of course, between the finger and the thumb. And if it's a left-side pain, you do that. And if it's on both sides, then be a dentist. So that was kind of, how I started to experiment and look elsewhere to see what, similar kinds of applications, what would they do elsewhere. So that progressed, and by the end of '97, I was invited by Aussie Wrench actually to teach for the Bowen Academy of Australia, which was like, wow, because he knew, I was reasonably busy up in Lancashire, and I remember him saying to me, because the numbers had built back up then, you see, and again we got up to about 60, 65 people a week that I was seeing, which was plenty, plenty. And I remember him, I saw him a little bit, I saw Ozzy a bit before that. And I said, look, I'm still interested in teaching, Ozzy. He said, yeah, right. He said, how many people do you treat? And I said, well, it's about 60, 65 a week. He says, he said, what do you do the rest of the time? Like, Tom could rattle that off in an afternoon, just about, or a day. But of course, we don't work like Tom. We weren't taught in the way that Tom applied the work either. So that's kind of, the whole application of what we were taught and how we were taught to apply Bowen is completely evolved in a way that was very unlike what Tom did, and probably through other presentations that you've spoken with people like Graham Pennington. Tom's average treatment time was like 9 or 10 minutes, and he had like 20-minute appointments, time for people to get in, get undressed, get on the treatment table, for him to do his work, and then for them to leave. But his actual hands-on time was about 9 or 10 minutes, and that is completely removed from what I was taught, and many hundreds, if not thousands, of other people have been taught that application too. And don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that that's a wrong way to work, and it completely has validity, but it's very unlike how Tom worked. And it was more akin, really, then, to how I was working with the guys at the rugby team. Because I'd be treating like, half a rugby team, I'd be treating 8 players at a time. At a time. I'd be doing a little bit of work on this guy and then going to the next guy and doing a little bit of work on that. And it was I went round like this. And in the space of, 20 minutes, half an hour, I'd treated half the team. And then they got back out training again, and I pulled the other half of the team out and started working on them. So it was, that time when I look back, it was extremely valuable because it taught me how to not only work efficiently, but also how to read the body well too, because you had to do it quickly. And I think that for any practitioner listening to this, it's an absolute key thing. You have to be able to read the body, what it needs, what is the tissue like, how is it changed from what it normally should be, how does this side of the body compare to that side of the body. You've got to do all that, and you've got to do it really quick. And I think this was one of Tom's strengths too, that through his thousands of treatments a year, he developed that really rapid, quick way of just putting a hand on the body and knowing where that was. It wasn't anything magical. I mean, we hear this story, it was a gift from God. And some people are just gifted. You get little Chinese kids, at 5 playing Mozart piano concertos and all this stuff. And they are gifted, but it's through a lot of practice as well. What you see is a performance from some of these very gifted children. They have an innate ability, but it's also a lot of practice there too. And I think, those two things came together for Tom as well. He had an inbuilt natural ability for the sense of touch, but then for the thousands of treatments he did, it just sharpened it and made it much more focused and quicker. So I think, but for people watching this, that's the real key thing. You've got to be able to put your hands on a body or even observe a body visually and be able to know where that thing is coming from. And of course, the next thing is like, what do I do about it? That's the next bit, is like, how do I now modify and change what I've seen and felt? How do I change that to how it really should be? And that's the real trick, isn't it? And that's really what takes, years of experience and learning. And also, I think not being afraid to step out of where you are, to try something new, because we'll never get anywhere by doing the same thing and hoping it works. It'll work sometimes, and it does, but for other times it won't, and it doesn't. So we've got to be unafraid about challenging what we know and working beyond what we know and just trying that out and see if that works. And if it doesn't, well, try something else. So, we get back to, my kind of chronology. And so by the end of 97, I started to teach for the Bowen Academy of Australia, straight teaching 4-day classes, which was a huge challenge from never hardly presenting anything before and being thrust into this thing But, I enjoyed it. And I continue to enjoy it. I continue to enjoy teaching. And I'm sure people who are taking my classes, my life classes, will recognize that I have a passion for what I do and how I do what I do. So we go forward a few years, and I taught for the Bowen Academy of Australia for 7 years, up to about 2005. And what had happened over those intervening years is I developed more and more of my own techniques to really address things where I felt Bowen wasn't addressing them. And I think we've got to be careful of, and I think it's a really important thing, is that whatever therapy we do, whatever approach we have to recognize, and I certainly do, that whatever we do has its limitation. There is no thing out there that does everything. And one of my main gripes about how sometimes Bowen is portrayed, not by everyone, but by some people, is that Bowen can address anything. Okay. Now, this is not like I don't understand what Bowen is. It's not from an area where I lack the experience in Bowen to make that statement. It's not from a place where I lack understanding about what Bowen is either. So I'm fully conversant with all that, and I see what it can do, and it can do some pretty amazing things. And I've seen it, and I've done it. In fact, my own father, prior to me learning Bowen, I'm going to go back a little bit again, he'd had spinal surgery, and they messed it up, and he was basically in a wheelchair. And he was in a wheelchair for about 2.5 years. Couldn't really support himself on his legs. Then they did a scan on him, and they used a chemical dye in his spine that gave him basically chemical meningitis, and he nearly died from that. And there's been a lot of litigation about using these chemical-based dyes that they inject into your spine for scanning purposes. And he nearly died from that, and as a net result, he had pain continually. He couldn't walk. He was in a wheelchair. And this was back about 92. So when I went down to ex-Bowen and did this course on Bowen for 4 days, he was one of the first people, of course, that I treated when I came back. And in a series of treatments, he continued to improve and improve to the point where he was pain-free virtually, and he could walk again. So, I haven't told that story actually for a long time. And basically, my dad was at the point he had so much pain, he was at a point of ending his life. And I'm not overstating that. He talked about that. He said, I can't go on. So Bowen does miraculous things. Yes, it does. But at the same time, I have to balance that off with sometimes it can't and it doesn't. Yeah. And also, I've had some conversations with Kevin Ryan, Dr. Kevin Ryan, who's an osteopath. He actually taught Bowen while Tom was alive. He held some classes up in New South Wales, and with Tom's blessing, he did that. And I've had some interesting chats with Kevin, and I said to him, what was roughly Tom's success rate? And he said, on a good day, about 70%, 75%, he said, on a good day, about that. And that was really, interesting to know that maybe 25% of cases Tom couldn't help. He wasn't successful with it. And it kind of validated what I was thinking, is sometimes it doesn't and it can't. So for people who say, he can address anything, I've even heard people say, well, Bowen can change your DNA. And I don't know where to get that from it, really, And I do think it's given a little bit too much reverence in some countries, and I think can be a cultural thing that too, that it's portrayed in a kind of almost a quasi-religious way that it can do no wrong, it can do no harm, and so on, and it absolutely can. Anything that has the power to do good can also have the power to do bad. So you've got to be careful how you apply what you know, but also at the same time recognize its limitations. And so, because of the limitations that I saw, particular things that it wasn't addressing well, I had to kind of work out myself and fill some of those gaps in. So in things like the atlas, that's one thing, and I came up with something that would help to address the atlas. Scoliosis. Yeah, I've heard Bowen can help with that, and, I've seen some pictures of some practitioners' results with that, and that's fine, but I never achieved that through Bowen. So I came up with something else that would achieve that, and things like and this was a really bad one, Ben, that I used to see a lot, and people, practitioners do see this a lot. Sciatic pain from intervertebral disc injury, lumbar spine disc injury. And, for years as a massage therapist and then as a Bowen practitioner, I used to hate people coming in that had sciatica from disc injury, because I really found that the massage work was actually irritating it, making it worse. And then what I had with Bowen, things like the pelvic procedure and the, diaphragm and respiratory procedure and stuff like that, also didn't address that. And I felt very frustrated by that. And it took me a long time to work out what I needed to do for that. But eventually I got something that works extremely well. And that's all part of other stuff that I do.
Yeah.
And of course, it's an integral part of how I work every day as well.
Cool.
So by 2005, what I recognized is that what I was teaching was not what I was doing in clinic.
Yeah.
And for quite a while, it was kind of rubbing me up and not sitting well mentally with me that, I was teaching people how to do this, procedure 1, 2, 3, and this and this and this, and turn them over and do that and that and that. And that's not how I was working in my clinic. So eventually, that got the better of me, and I had to kind of give that away. And so I stopped teaching for the Bowen Academy in 2005. And then I didn't teach anything for about 6 years. I didn't do anything. I just did clinic work again, and the clinic was full and life was simple, and and then I got a phone call. I got a phone call from it wasn't a phone call, with an email from somebody I knew in Norway, and I hadn't heard from her for quite a while, because I used to go over to, when I was teaching Bowen, I taught in Norway. I introduced Bowen into Norway. I introduced Bowen into Spain. I introduced Bowen into Italy and Cyprus. Can't remember anything else. But I got this phone call from somebody I taught in Norway, and she said, "I'm sorry to trouble you," she said, "but I've got this. Somebody's supposed to be coming to Oslo this weekend. I think this was like Tuesday." I said, "I've got somebody coming to Oslo this weekend to teach some Bowen, but they can't make it because they're sick. Could you come and teach us something?" I said, "What?" She said, "Well, anything, just so that we can have this weekend, you see, and I don't have to cancel the whole thing." So I said, "Oh, right," and I kind of booked a flight pretty quick and got over to Oslo. And what I taught them basically was this new stuff that I'd developed over the intervening years, or some of it, because since 2011, of course, it developed some more and more. And that was a 2-day class then. So I did, and I taught that, and they were all kind of, "Oh, this is really good. Can you come back and do another one?" So I kind of did that again, and then people in England heard about it, and could you teach us that too? And so I did some small classes and all this stuff. And that's kind of how it all got going.
Beautiful. I love as well just the breadth of how this has evolved over time. You know, even coming back to the work with the rugby teams, I know, for example, that Paula Esson in the work that she's done at the high level basketball, and now the elite football work that she does, she knows it makes an incredible difference. I've worked with a lot of mountain bikers that are working at quite elite level. And again, we can make such an amazing difference. And I think, you know, you're also reflecting something that in conversations with Michael Nixon-Livy, with Graham Pennington, with Ron Phelan, that this palpation, this time on bodies is so essential if we're really going to develop those sensory skills. And there's nothing better than the amount of time. And I've certainly found, you know, I've been qualified in Bowen for 13 years now, that the more work I do, the more sensitive and the faster that ability to work with people. And I think it's really good to highlight as well that Bowen isn't the panacea that will solve all problems, and incredible as it is. And I think, again, this is reflected in the work of people like Gus de la Cara, who's brought in the biggest work, the immune work, and the other aspects that we see as good adjuncts and good support to what is going on. And certainly, ever since I've introduced Art of Bodywork into my practice, some of the things that were trickier to deal with have really helped. And scoliosis is a really good example of that. You know, I've had a client who was 14 when I started with a scoliosis, and we had some really nice results in Bowen. But I've now got a client who's in her late 20s and has, you know, quite an interesting double S, and just the amount of difference we've made in just 3 sessions on that, and what she's perceiving by using the AOB procedures with scoliosis is just incredible. So let's go into more about how you formalized that and what that's become.
Yeah, I mean, all of this stuff. And what I teach in 3 days is that the accumulation of all these years of kind of messing about, issue of development, of trying things and failing and it not working, and trying something different. And a good example of that is my treatment for scar tissue. And that was an interesting evolution, really. And prior to Bowen, you know, as a massage therapist, I'd kind of seen scars and think, gosh, this is hard and dense tissue. This has got to be having an effect. And I do some massage on it, and it wouldn't really change. It just kind of got red and irritated, but it didn't really change me. And so when we get to the era of working with the Aussie wrench, you know, I asked Aussie about scar tissue, and I said, "Did Tom do any work with scars?" He said, "Well, yeah, he did." He said he did this little move up here and down here and down here and a bit in the middle. And he said, "But that was about it." And I said, "Oh, okay." And I went back to my clinic and I tried that, and guess what? It didn't work. It didn't work, right? So I scratched my head for a while and then started to develop some other stuff. All these things that I developed, it's a little bit like there's a lot of things going on at once. You'll see a presentation like the disc injury, you'll work on that, and that won't work. And then the next person, it'll be a scoliosis, and you'll work on that, and that doesn't work. Or you try different things. And it's a very slow evolution to see what does work and what changes scar tissue, for example, what changes the scoliosis and so on. And it's a very slow evolution. And then there are things that you might not see for a long time. And there's one, for instance, which is the displaced pisiform bone. Okay. Now, this is just a little thing where the pisiform gets knocked out of position. And you might not see that. You might only see that once or twice a year, something like that. And so when it came along, it's like once or twice a year event. What do I do with that? And if you don't get it, then you've lost it. And you've got to wait for another period of time before you see it again and try it out again. So, you know, we fast forward a little bit and we get up to about 2015, and through Graham Pennington, I had the pleasure to meet Ronnie Slayton. And we had this kind of big powwow in Chicago. And I went to that. And whilst I was there, I had, again, occasion to to ask Romney. I said, about scar tissue. I said, what did Tom do for scar tissue? And he said, he folded his arms like this, and he said, I was observing Tom like for a period of 5 years, and he said, I never saw him treat a scar once. I thought, okay, that's okay. I mean, by then I'd kind of worked out the work that I do for scar tissue. It was a long process, getting the pressure correct, getting the timing of the treatment correct, getting the tempo of the work correct. It all takes time to refine that. And there are little subtleties with the scar work, like there are little micro pauses in the move before you take the next move, which isn't always observable to, when you're just looking at somebody doing that. You don't always see that, but it's in there. So that was that. And then in 2018, when I was in Australia, Kevin Ryan also, we had some time speaking with Kevin Ryan, and when I said to Kevin, "What did Tom do for scars?" And he said, and he took me right back to when I was talking to Ozzy Wrench about 1997 or something, 98. And Kevin Ryan, he said, well, he did a move here, and he did a move here, and he did a move here, and he did a move there, and something in the middle. So it was very much like what Ozzy had observed too, but he put a little end of a sentence onto it, did Kevin, which was extremely important. And he said, but he only did it if the client thought it was important.
Yes.
Right? So it was kind of thing like, oh, Tom, I've got this bad shoulder and I had some surgery. I think it's the scar. So Tom would do like whittly, whittle, whittle, and I think it was kind of like placebo work for the person to say, well, yeah, that's been addressed now. Okay. But it wasn't, again, anything that you could take in isolation and say that works for scar tissue. It would probably be other work that Tom did on his shoulder that would actually free that up. Okay. But it wasn't that work per se that actually addressed the scarring. So we kind of got it verified, by 3 people. Romney never ever saw him do anything for scars. And to a large degree, and this is absolutely no criticism of Tom Bowen at all. And please, anybody listening to this is not where I'm coming from with this statement. I don't believe Tom saw the relevance of scar tissue and its impact in the physiology and biomechanical functions of the body. And that's no slur on him, because most practitioners don't know that either. I did a video interview just yesterday with another group in England, a group of about a dozen practitioners there. And my question always to groups of people when I talk to them, I said to this group of 12 or wherever it was people, I said, can you tell me, have you got a scar from a surgery or from accidental injury? And I always ask that question to groups of people, like in class, or if I'm doing a presentation, in any way, I ask that question. Do you know virtually, it's nearly almost 100% of people. Mm-hmm. It's nearly always. It might be 90, if it's a younger group of people, it's going to be a little bit less. Mm-hmm. As we get older, the predisposition for needing a surgery or having some kind of traumatic accident resulting in a scar is going to be there. And the thing about those numbers, when you're approaching 100% of people that say, yes, I've got a scar, is that's also representative of the kind of percentage you're going to get in your clinic. Mm-hmm. So if you're treating 30 people a week, you can bet that 28 or 27 of those people around are going to have a scar from a surgery or an accident. But then what do you do with that? And the second question that I tend to ask to groups of people, which I asked yesterday, and I always ask when I'm doing even one-to-one tutorials with people, I'll say, in your background as a whatever, how much did you learn about scar tissue and how to treat it? Mm-hmm. And the answer is nearly always very little or nothing at all. And I do think there is a big hole in bodyworkers' education. It's not in every modality. And we're talking to osteopaths, for example. Some of those actually know quite a bit about the effects of scar tissue. In fact, now I've done some tutorials to some osteopaths in Canada over different periods of time, talking to osteopaths on a one-to-one. And I asked the question, how much do you know about scar tissue? And the first person this osteopath in Canada, I think they were from Toronto or something, said actually quite a lot. It kind of took me back a bit, you know quite a lot. I said, oh, really? I said, that's interesting. I said, how come? He said, well, he says, I was trained at the Osteopathic School of Canada. And he said, it's the first thing they teach. Sure. The first thing they teach in osteopathic school in Canada, and I think it's a 5-year course, the first thing they teach is about scar tissue. I said, no way. He said, yeah, that's what we do. I said, well, how come you're talking to me? He said, well, I'm still looking for something that actually will address scar tissue well. Right. And that happened over, 2 or 3 years. I'd also had opportunity to train some other osteopaths from Canada, here and there, and they all said the same. So it almost all true. And I remember the last lady that I taught, she was from Vancouver, an osteopath from Vancouver, very experienced lady. She'd been in osteopathy a long time. And I showed her the MSTR work, the scar work. And she said, I've never seen anything like that in my life. And she's experienced osteopath. Never seen anything like it in my life. And she went away and she completed the course in no time at all. And she wrote to me, she said, this is the most phenomenal work. And I'm using it in all kinds of situations, not just for scars, things like nerve entrapment, where nerves lack gliding. Nerves are supposed to glide as we move and stretch. Okay, for all that kind of stuff, for arteries and veins that are also stuck in the tissues as well. I'm using it for that too, she said. But overall, when I asked the question to groups of practitioners, how much do you know? It's little or nothing at all. And so part of my work is actually to fill that hole and gap of knowledge. And I think, and talking to all you Bowen people, BTPA and all the other skills that are out there, this should also be included in the education at some point. It should either be early in, or if you don't want to include it in a purely Bowen thing, it should be there as postgraduate learning too, because there's an absolute need for it. And this is not just because I devised this treatment. Back in 2002, there was some research done in Eastern Europe by a doctor and an osteopath, and you'll find the research on the internet. The research was called Lewitt and Olsanska, Dr. Lewitt and an osteopath called Olsanska. So you'll find the PDF there. And in the conclusion of their research on scars and their effect on people, on subjects, what they said was that if an active scar is not addressed, it would be the cause of treatment not being successful or the problem recurring. That's what they found out. Wow. And I read this, much later on, not in 2002. I only read this, probably about 6 or 7 years ago, but it really underpinned what I've been thinking, is that sometimes scars are really a part of the presenting problem, and until they're addressed, the problem can keep recurring. So if you're getting, as a Bowen practitioner, if you're getting results in your clinic, but then you're going to have to do it again next month or next week, the work, your Bowen work is not holding well, is it because an untreated scar is underpinning the problem and part of that presenting problem? And it often is, because of what we said just earlier is that there's a high proportion of people that walk through your door with scars from surgery or an accident that have not yet been addressed. And I think this is another problem from mainstream medicine, is that there is a degree of post-surgical care, but it doesn't always address the ongoing and developing scar tissue. Because scar tissue doesn't, when it's finished, it's not finished. It can have knock-on effects and deeper effects as time progresses. So, things like adhesions that will form later on, months or years afterwards. So, of course, we never connect the two events. We never connect that surgery 5 years ago with what's happening now. Because, rational thinking would tell us that, well, if it was going to create the problem, it would have done it before now. But because scar tissue is a developmental thing and an ongoing thing, you might not get those problems till years after that tissue has been damaged and repaired. So that's also something that that message we need to get across to practitioners, that it is often highly influential in the presenting problem. Not all scars are, but some are. And so as part of the training that we do for practitioners is to help them to determine, is that scar involved in the problem or is it not? Okay, so there's ways of finding that out. There's certain things that we're going to look for and test for to find out if it's potentially implicated in another presenting problem. So that's all part of the education that we want to provide for people to fill this gap about not knowing about what scar tissue does to the physiology or to the psycho-emotional component of the client, or even to the energetic, which you're highly interested in, I know, Ben. The energetic component of what the scar does and how that can block the flow of chi. So all these things are highly important. And that's kind of, what we like to share with practitioners in our course.
And I find it really amazing as well that the scar work itself, learning the technique, is not a complex thing. I love the efficient simplicity of the treatment. Again, for me, it's like another incredible abstraction from how, when we've gone from manual treatments that on the body overall were deep and heavy to the more targeted efficiency of something like Bowen Technique or Art of Bodywork. And then the scar work is like another refinement of that. And I agree that, part of the postgraduate training of every Bowen practitioner should include the implication of the scar. And, I love the fact that people have the option to do online training. I know that you're really developing the MSTR portal for this as well. So tell us a little bit more about the kind of the way that training takes place for people.
Yeah, for my scar work particularly, we do live classes in many countries of the world. In the UK, not so many live classes are available just due to we've got Paula Essen in Northern Ireland who teaches live classes. Paula is like up over her head in work with Legal Light Centre and Football Club and all kinds of other projects that she's into. But I have a live class coming off in Stevenage in Hertfordshire. That's in June. And that might be the only live class that I will teach in the UK. So what we've done, because it's really difficult to, for me to get around and for instructors to offer live classes, over the past 6 months or so, I really worked hard in developing this online facility, which is all automated, which means that for a series of 6 months access to the information that we provide, and 6 months is ample time to study and learn and review and constantly review that until you've got that information really well in here. Basically, it's me teaching you. So by a series of videos and other material, I'll be teaching you how to do this work. It's got things, like PDF downloads. It's got little quizzes in there to reinforce your learning. And it's all automated. If you were at like 10 o'clock in an evening, you think, I just, fancy spending 15 minutes just having a look at the course, you can do. If you get up early in the morning, you think, I just want to have a look at the course again. you can do that with this. Followed at the end by, a live 1 hour call with any of our instructors, wherever you buy this. And if you're watching this in another country, we've got instructors in lots of different countries. Followed by this 1 hour call by your instructor who can answer any questions in a live meeting and also just check on your technique that you're actually reproducing this work well. And it isn't a complex technique. That's one thing that's highly in its favour, that people really quickly get to grips with how to do this work. So they're going to get results really, really quickly when they start to apply this. And again, with experience, you just get better and better. So that's on the online course, and that's all available to find out more on what's included in all of the well over 60 lessons in that. Pretty comprehensive. It's the comprehensive thing, the most comprehensive thing we've ever done. With lots of information, our research is in there too. We've done ultrasound research, showing pre and post treatment measurements. And we've also done things like myotonometry. Myotonometry is a little device that actually has a probe that pushes it into the skin, the tissue, or into the scar in this case, is what we're measuring. And it measures different things like how tense the tissue is, how well does it move, how much does it deflect and return to normal. All these parameters are measured in this little device. And we've done some interesting research with that too. So what I like to do is, I could go on all day about how good this stuff is, but I think what people want is with a critical eye is to look at data, numbers that can't be fixed or forged, or, it's not a placebo, because we've got measurable data, which you can't fake. You can't fake this data. The little machine that we bought, it's only about the size of your phone, but it costs about 8,000 or 9,000 euros. But it's a research grade instrument. And because we purchased it, it means we can do multiple research projects with this all the time. And we just involved in doing another one with trigger points, treating trigger points with MSTR as well. So that's going to be interesting data when that comes out. But I think what people want, practitioners, they want to be able to see measurable results that actually confirm everything that we're saying. Of course, the main thing is that it actually creates positive outcome with our clients, and especially post-operatively.
Yeah.
So, lots of scope there for application when you think that 90% of the people that walk through your door have got a scar that may need.
Yeah. And you've moved on to this as well with the Art of Bodywork teaching. I saw when I was kind of researching back in that you've created a portal where a lot of the individual techniques there are learnable, where the program is learnable online as well. But you're also going to be in the UK next year to do the 3-day AOB course, aren't you?
That's right. The 3-day course, we've just organised that for in July. That's just going to be in Manchester, very close to Manchester Airport. So if we've got 1 or 2 people flying in from Europe too, we want to do that. Very near the motorway network for people travelling from within the UK. That will be my only AOB course in the UK in 2025. So don't miss out on that. We'll cover everything there. But also, yes, I developed this online portal too, same as for the MSTR work, but for all my other techniques too, which again is all automated. And it's just a fact that we're living in a really great time because all this new technology that comes out to enable us to do that. I've been looking for a platform where I could place this information and people to securely view that. And it wasn't until earlier this year that I came across such a portal. And of course, I got stuck into it and made it available. Because, even people buying the online course, whether it's the SCAR course or my Art of Bodywork stuff, they get it. just from, looking at the video. They get it. And really it's because all the techniques I do are not that complex to get a hand. The results tend to come through really quick too. And I don't know whether that's because I'm a really quite impatient person, but for me, when I was developing all this stuff, I needed to see in the clinic that structure or those tissues were changing. Because when I knew that I could send that client away and pretty much they were going to get improvement. And that's perfectly true. What I don't like is this idea of applying work and then just hoping it's going to work and then see what happens next week. That's not where I come from as a practitioner. I need to know that what I've done has created an effect, even if they don't necessarily feel it right away, but they often do. But for me, I've got to be able to see these structural changes, these tissue changes. And when I have achieved that, I know I've done my work, and then we'll build on that in the next appointment. But even on learning this stuff online, it's not difficult. A lot of these videos are filmed from multiple angles. They come with an audio commentary and downloadable instructions too, and there's all that stuff. So people really don't have a problem. But as always, no matter, and I do like to do this, is support practitioners. So if they've got questions about what it is I'm teaching them, I'm always available by email to explain that. And even if necessary, take a video call with them to explain it, in a more conversational way. But, I like to do that for the people who are interested in my work so that they get the best out of it too. That's all I want. Yeah.
I mean, I found it incredible when I did the in-person class, and I really highly recommend that for anybody listening in to take the opportunity to be with Alastair next year. It's a great person to work with. And the clarity and the simplicity of the work and the freedom and the flexibility that it allows us, especially for me in reflection to what I would class as the typical Bowen model, makes an incredible difference in the results that we get. And like you say, they're often measurable, observable for both either myself or the client pretty much immediately. And I can remember writing on the cover of my manual, I was on that course with you. I called you the Bruce Lee of bodywork, and I applied the maxim of Bruce Lee's system Jeet Kune Do to you, which was that no form as form, no way as way. And I found that was very useful because there was like this frame that was no frame. It was like, if it's there, treat it. If it isn't, don't. And, if there's something that indicates, work with it. If it isn't, don't. And I loved that kind of openness and that freedom that came with it.
Yeah, it just reminds me of something that happened. We did a class in Slovenia a couple of years ago, and partway through the class, during the demo, and while they were practicing, somebody wrote on the board, "Jedi Master in town," and I want to turn around and looked at it. I don't know, it just cracked me up there. But this is just out of curiosity, really, Ben. It's not. If I've been blessed with a skill, it's just about exploring stuff and not being afraid to try it out. Because when I was developing all this stuff, and I continue to do that, I mean, my clinic work is minimal. Most of my time is spent on, supporting students and the nearly 1,500 MSTR practitioners that we've got around. It's a huge number, and that's only the qualified people. We have the students too. And the team of instructors. We've got 17, 18 instructors around the world. So a lot of my time is, based at the computer, supporting everybody in that network. So I get very little time to do practice work, which I really miss. But whenever I do, I'm right back in the groove again, and I'm still working stuff out, you see. So it's something that, it just comes from within, and that, you can't help yourself. And I encourage, practitioners to do that. Sometimes we get the question in our Facebook groups or whatever, could we use MSTR for this? And I would say, like, well, I actually never thought of that. I never used it before. But, sometimes we end up being on the cutting edge of something. And until you take that step, we're not ever going to know.
Yeah, I very much agree with that. Found for myself, one of the curiosities I got after MSTR training was belly buttons, the primary scar of the body. Everybody has, and just the reflection that when you pull that belly button scar in different directions, some of the reflections through the body, it's amazing how far they go.
Yeah. And that's interesting because, when I was developing this, there was a light bulb moment, which is now obvious, but it wasn't then before the light bulb came, is that, this work is like multi-directional. And it's really because fascia is multi-directional. So it made perfect sense that this technique to address the scar tissue, which is it's all really compressed, collagen fibers, laid down in a very haphazard and random fashion to repair the body when it's sliced open. And it does this in a really quick and disorganized way. And so it was a logical progression of thought, well, to get a result with this, the treatment's got to be multi-directional too. Well, that's a feature of the work that I think is reasonably unique. I don't know, because I don't look at other stuff, so I don't really know that. All I know is that, as soon as I applied that in multi-directional way, the tissue response just went kind of off the map. It just like, now it's getting it. Yeah. But I do encourage practitioners to take that step sometimes. And something that's amusing that I'll sometimes say in a live class is that when I was developing this and working on people in my clinic, they never knew that I didn't know, right? They never knew that I was kind of working it out, So I'd say, how's that feel now? And they say, no, I just start to say, okay, well, what about if we do that in this way? So, that's a bit better, yeah. Okay, now you say, so I'm learning as I'm going. But don't be afraid to do that. We have to be brave sometimes and step out of that formula and step out of that area of information and knowledge that we know, just to put that on. And of course, what we're really saying here is that all these techniques and so on, bodywork, is progressive. It's not static, and it shouldn't be stuck in time. And with all reverence to Ozzy Wrench, who really exposed Bowen and gave it the exposure that it needed and it deserved. Don't be afraid to develop on from that. It's a perfect building block from which to develop and enhance. It's a great thing on its own, but I do believe, if Tom had lived another 10 years or 20 years, because he wasn't that old when he died, gosh, I'm older than him now, that if he'd have lived another 10 or 20 years, how much he would have built on what he knew. And I think that's the human way, isn't it? With our lives, we build on what we've learned. And hopefully learn the lessons that life teaches us, and we progress on from that too. Because if we don't, then the lesson just gets harder.
Yeah, absolutely. And with that in mind, there's a couple of questions I'd like to ask you, because we've been going for over an hour now, which is beautiful. I love the ease of this flowing through. But there's two things I'm really curious about. The first is, what do you wish that somebody had taught you in the early days that's now become really fundamental to the way that you work?
Whoa, that's a big question. That's a big question. What? I'm going to say, because I'm trying to grasp for a thought and it's not there. So what I'm going to say is nothing at all, because I think my progression was the way it was supposed to be. And if somebody had come in and altered that, it could have completely changed the way I developed what I developed. So I'm going to say that everything is as it's supposed to be. And that's another life thing too, isn't it?
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
So, and it taught me a lot. I think the main thing is that as a practitioner, you've just got to roll your sleeves up and you've just got to do time at the coalface.
Yes.
You've got to do your time. You've got to do your apprenticeship, and you've got to develop what you know over time. And have a passion for your work. Be intensely interested in what you do. If you only have a passing interest in what you do, you won't learn. You won't develop. You'll be comfortable with what you do. And there's nothing wrong with being comfortable with what you do. That's not to put anybody down, but if you really want to push yourself and push the envelope as a practitioner on what can you achieve and how can you help more people, then you've got to do that. You've got to spend the time. You've got to get the experience, and you've got to be intensely interested in that person at that moment. And then when they're gone, you're intensely interested in that next person, because this is a thing that I've always said, and I'm sure other people have said it too, is that every person that's on your treatment table is an opportunity to learn. Every person, whether you've seen that problem 1,000 times before, that person has responded to that, like scars, a common surgery or carpal tunnel surgery or a cesarean section surgery will affect that person, each person in a completely different way. So just because it's a C-section, I've done loads of C-sections, it wouldn't affect this person like it affected everyone else. So be really focused on what you do. Another thing that I would say is that don't just get in the habit of using techniques. Okay, even the Bowen technique or my techniques. You've got to feel the tissue. It's not about performing the technique. It's what's happening there as you do that. What is it you feel? And when you go back to it, has it changed? Was the stimulus sufficient to create the change? And if it has, you've done your job. You've done your work. So it's not about applying technique. In the beginning, I think it is. In the beginning, it is. And we do 1, 2, 3, 4, and then 2-minute break, and then 5, 6, 7, 8, and then 2-minute break. And we do it like that, formulate. And surprisingly, it works too. But we have to graduate from that. And each move that we do, and obviously Wrench said this, and Romney said this, and Kevin Ryan said this, is that the move is also an assessment. As you perform that move, you're not just making the move, you're assessing what it's like there. How dense is the tissue? How tense is it? What's the thickness and the density of it, and how taut is it? How does it deflect? Is it dry or is it wet? Is it oily? It all tells you something. So all that information comes in through your fingers and permeates and means something as you do it. So that's another thing is, be in the moment of the move.
Yeah.
Whatever move you happen to be doing.
And that's a common reflection as well, especially Graham, Ron, Michael Nixon, Livy, all saying the same thing. It's about that presence, and it's about, I love the way you put it, the time at the coalface. I think there is nothing for it, and there is nothing wrong with being a beginner and progressing and making that experience over time. And I now love how much time I've spent getting to experience this stuff and just how it unfolds in my experience each time. So I'm curious as well, my kind of penultimate question, if you like, is what do you think we should be exploring that isn't being given enough attention? And where do you see kind of the manual therapies like the Bowens and Art of Bodywork, where do you see it evolving over the next decade?
I think going back to that point, what I said is that scar tissue is widely ignored, not just in the Bowen world, but in all kinds of modalities. And I think part of it is, first of all, lack of awareness. But the second thing is, and it's like what some of these osteopaths from Canada said, is that they learned all about that, but they didn't have a really good tool to address it. And I think that's the vital part too. We can learn all about it, but what can we then do about it? So for me, and it's a continual thing, is creating this awareness with practitioners of all kinds of modalities to say, this is important, folks. You can't ignore it. You can't ignore it. You can't get away from it. And so, I hear, little comments that filter back to me. For example, saying that they don't, a certain person actually doesn't or has never actually seen the need to address scars because they haven't really seen that they create any particular effect. And I think that's partly a lack of awareness of observational awareness, but also look at what other researchers in mainstream medicine, what have they found? They've found that it does. And so, that kind of backs up what I'm saying is that there are lots of research papers that say it does this, scar tissue is weaker, scar tissue adheres to and creates adhesions and so on and so on. And so all this is very relevant. So for me, this should be part of every massage therapist, every physiotherapist toolbox, every Bowen therapist, every EMET therapist, whatever you do. Acupuncture. I mean, there are protocols for treating scar tissue in acupuncture. So acupuncture recognizes that. Acupuncture recognizes that it can block or redirect and reroute chi. And we also see that it changes that. So that for me would be the thing. As for the other stuff, I think what I'm seeking to help practitioners with, and people who maybe not very experienced, and they may have a lot of self-doubt of perhaps in the early stages of doing body work, helping them to give them the confidence in themselves and in what they're doing. And I do think, particularly my scar work and my other stuff, provides that, because the changes in tissue happen really quick.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden they're gaining confidence because, gosh, yeah, this is better now. And I did that.
Yeah.
And then for the more experienced practitioners, giving them insights into other tools that they can implement that will enhance their reputation as a practitioner. It will enhance their clinical outcomes, because all of a sudden they've got something really effective for things like intervertebral disc injury. They've got something really good for foot pronation. They've got something really good that will help to check and reset the atlas. And what it will do all the time, what I'm hoping all this achieves, is to accelerate people's progress, practitioners' progress, to accelerate their progress so they can get to a high point of skill much more quickly. And then when they're at that high point of skill, they develop on that too. So people that, follow me, build on what I shared with them. And so we're just we all exist in a little point of time, coming in here and going out there, and then just leaving a little bit for other people to build on in that next generation. So that's kind of what I hope would happen with my work, and with Bowen too. Why not?
Me too. And I really support that vision as well, Alastair. I love it. And again, it's interesting because even in the original form of kinesiology that I was trained in, we did explicit scar work actually quite early on in the training as well, looking at the energetic aspects of it. And for anyone that doesn't feel that scars might have an implication, just ask 10 women who've had C-sections about their experiences, and you'll get 10 very different outcomes. So to think that there's no effect of a scar, you've only got to take in a little bit of data to really be able to kind of get some support for that. It's really appreciate time today, Alastair. I love talking to you. We got on really nicely when I did AOB with you, and it's really nice to reconnect with you. Highly recommend everybody takes the opportunity to work with Alastair when he's back in the UK in 2025. And we'll stick links to that down in the description for this video. But if people want to learn more about you, where's the best place to send them?
To my website, McLaughlinscarrelease.com. If you can't find it, just put MSTR scar treatment, and it's #1 Google ranked or whatever. And then the other one, all my other stuff, is artofbodywork.online, or for the live classes, artofbodywork.training. Okay, so there's two different websites. One for the online stuff, Art of Bodywork online, and the other stuff, artofbodywork.training, and you'll find the information there. If not, you'll just Google me and you'll be able to find my contact details.
Well, we'll make sure we've got links for all of that and your socials in the description. Alastair, thank you so much. It's been great speaking to you, and wishing you all the very best with continued development of your work. And thank you as well to everybody who's been listening in today. So I'm Ben Calder for the BTPA, the Bowen Therapy Professional Association. We really appreciate your time and attention as well. And we'll look forward to bringing you more of these. This will be our last one for 24, but we'll look forward to bringing you more of these in 2025. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.